advice we received in the 24th verse is to keep your mind equanimous at all times. If you are keen to attain the state of Vishnu, what was the advice we all got last week? How to keep our mind equanimous? Can any one of you recall? What did we say? How to keep your mind equanimous? Any practical tips we give ourselves, Sriniji?
Pranam Guruji.
Namaskar.
That's great. I think what you were talking about last time, the way I understood, was try and analyze what causes stress first. Then once you understand what causes stress, try and understand the repercussions of what that's likely to happen. That basically dials you back to say, okay, this is how you avoid it, and therefore you get to equanimity.
Right. So, in effect, what we said there is, when you bring in a sense of rationality to the source of that mental agitation, there could be an experience or two, there could be moments where you lose your composure, you lose your balance. If you start analyzing what is it that is causing that mental unrest, in effect, what we are saying is it is the intellect that produces peace, isn't it? When we try to bring in a sense of reasoning, a sense of clarity, inject wisdom into that situation, the end result should be, it should bring in a certain mental equanimity within. It should take care of the restlessness of the mind, the anxiety of the mind, because of the wrong relationship we have set up with the world. We've often established it. We've always maintained it. Stress is nothing but a wrong relationship with the objects and beings of the world. There's nothing external that can actually cause or attribute any unrest or any mental anxiety. It is your wrong relationship with it. So when you inject that wisdom, intellect produces peace. Now, the effect one, so intellect is the cause, effect is the peace. Now, what's also further interesting to note is where you have restored peace, peace becomes the ground where intellect becomes erect. In environments, in moments where you have been able to keep your mind equanimous, your intellect becomes erect, your intellect becomes optimal, your intellect starts functioning to the greatest clarity. Now, the verse is talking of the second half of what we just said. First, we said is intellect produces peace, and the verse here is talking peace produces intellect. In its own way, he's saying, if you want to invoke the Lord Vishnu, if you want to realize the state of Vishnu, you need to keep your mind equanimous. At a relative level, If you want to think clearly, if you want to have that wisdom with you, you got to create that mental climate. In a disturbed climate, you can't have access to wisdom at a relative level. Haven't we experienced when we are agitated, we are not our normal selves, isn't it? When we are mentally disturbed, we are not able to bring our best into the forefront. Our actions are impoverished. Our actions become emotional. Our actions are incoherent. So in order to bring in a sense of purpose, a sense of effectiveness, a sense of constructiveness to our actions, we need the peace of mind. At a relative level, at the absolute level, you want to realize the self, you need that peace of mind. Ultimately, it is the mental peace that produces the capacity to see the self, to realize the self. So it is the intellect that produces peace. Peace produces intellect. So one is the cause, other is the effect. Another becomes the cause, this becomes the effect. Venkatramji, if I can ask you to just sum up what I said so far, sir. Yes, sir.
We talked about equanimity and how to handle stress. And if we can handle stress, then we don't become involved with our emotions. Our emotions don't guide our actions. Our emotions don't drive our lives. And we remain above what I would call the turbulence of day-to-day lives. And that is that is how I interpreted what you said.
Perfect. Then how do you remove the turbulence which is experienced within? How do you subside it? How do you subdue it?
One, from the Vipassana school that I have.
Gee, if I could just, there's so much out there. Sorry to interrupt with your thought flow, but just to capture what we have just said, going by what the verse is saying. What did we say just now? One is the cause, other is the effect. Again, another becomes the cause, another the effect. What did we just say, sir?
This cycle of cause and effect should be broken mentally by staying equanimous, and we should not get caught into this continuous cycle of cause and effect, and stay away, mentally distance oneself from the occurrence and see it from a third party perspective, as if it is just something that is happening.
Okay. I'm just trying to recap what I've just said, sir.
Okay.
When there is stress, when there is mental imbalance, you need to settle the mind. How do you settle the mental frustration or the fluctuations? Is by rationalizing the situation. Bring in certain objectivity into it. Okay. So it is therefore logical to conclude that it is the intellect that produces peace. Am I right?
Correct.
Buddhi, which is the wisdom, when you inject wisdom into any situation, start examining what has gone wrong, where has it gone wrong, it settles it temporarily at least. So intellect produces peace. Are we right there?
Correct.
So one is the cause, the intellect is the cause, the effect is peace. Now, it's also right that when is it that your intellect is optimum? When is it your thinking is very clear? Only when your mind is calm and equanimous, isn't it?
Correct.
So it's also not wrong to say that it is the mental equanimity that produces the intellect.
Correct.
So the cause and effect we are trying to establish here is
Okay.
intellect is the cause, effect is the peace. Peace becomes the cause, intellect is the effect. So both are so interdependent in order to bring about an action which resonates, which is constructive, which brings about peace and harmony within and without. Isn't it?
It's a virtuous cycle.
It's a virtuous cycle. I like that.
Cycle, yeah.
Yes, I like the way you qualify it. It is a virtuous cycle, which is in your own interest, isn't it? To bring the best out of you, isn't it?
Correct.
Right. Very good, sir. So this is what the verse is saying from in its own language. In fact, this is actually spelled out in the Gita in the 2nd chapter, but I'm just borrowing the concept and clarifying it here. Because as you rightly said, when something is stressed, it loses its capacity, isn't it? When something is, even when there is a, let's say a metal rod, if it's stressed and if it has some fractures in it, cracks in it, what happens? It loses its strength, isn't it? So we are losing our ability to bring the best out when we are stressed.
It loses resilience.
It loses its resilience, yes. We become weak and vulnerable. And what is the sad reality of it? Sad reality of life?
A breakdown can happen if one does not deal with too much stress, and the stress continues to harm you. At some point of time, there can be breakdowns.
Very true. But what is the sad reality of life?
Sad reality. We are not conscious of this process happening within ourselves. And that is again because we don't have equanimity to see it. We become attached to the emotions.
You're right. Sad reality is we're already stressed. Everybody is experiencing it. And we don't realize that we are experiencing it. That's the only difference. Isn't it?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So we all constantly paying the price for not heeding this wisdom. So Rajas is a mental state where agitation lingers. RPG. Rajas is a state where the agitation lingers, isn't it? It persists. It keeps coming up again and again. Are we right, sir?
Yes.
And Sattva is a state where your mind peace lingers. So the question is, how long is Sattva predominating? How long is Rajas predominating in your course of your multifold activities of the day, throughout the day, isn't it?
Not enough and too much.
Not enough, yes.
Respectively.
Yes, absolutely.
Not enough Sattva, too much Rajas.
No, I got that. So our own self-assessment gives us a very clear analysis of where we need to head, isn't it? You don't need any guru out there. You don't need any text out there to tell us. It's just a clear assessment. Oh my God, I seem to linger more in the realm of Rajas. This Sattva, I'm not able to linger in peace for long because something comes and dislodges it, isn't it?
So one question I have though is for the ignorant soul doesn't know that there is such a thing as Sattva. There may be that longing or that agitation but they don't identify clearly that this is really something different, right? Because they get caught up in the I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about the stadium and the full stadium and the empty stadium, right?
Yes.
So we all think this is the full stadium, right? We think this is the reality, and we think it's great because we don't know better. We have no before exposure to this knowledge, right? Even though there may have been some thing kicking about inside, we don't know that, right? So I don't think it's rare. It's a rare person that's born with that knowledge that goes, oh yeah, there's that thing in there that I need to get a hold of. But so there is that, there has to be some sort of seed, right? So 10 or 12 years ago, I had never had this exposure. I would not know the difference, that there's this grander vision, this better place, right? I would have never had that.
Yes, in fact, experience itself teaches us this lesson, isn't it? What is it in experience that teaches us this? The experience of life teaches us the knocks and shocks of the world. Some point you start questioning, why am I going through this? Till then, ignorance has enveloped, so the thick veil of ignorance has consumed your life. You just went with the flow, unmindful of the price you're paying, of not heeding this higher values. That is ignorance. You don't even realize it. But that continuous unmindfulness comes to a point where you start questioning, why am I going through this? Is this what life is meant to be? When you start questioning your very experience, the very state you're in, that's when perhaps you start examining life, examining your position. You start looking for answers. Some people are born with this inbuilt ability to question these truths and inquire into the higher purposes. In fact, one of the beautiful sayings is, life is not meant to merely solve problems or hiccups of life. Life is meant for you to experience the reality. In my life, am I all the time just stuck with solving problems? There's some problem, there's a relationship problem, there's financial problem, there's emotional problem, there is neighbor's problem, there is my vehicle maintenance problem, there's some outside problem, all the time problem and problem and problem. Is this all life is meant to? Or is it meant to serve a higher purpose of realizing the very truth for why I'm here? Some are born with that innate quality, but life itself, at some point, it makes you introverted. That's what I'm saying. Either you learn it through knowledge or you learn it through experience. This is what is symbolized by Lord Vishnu holding. Rajima, what does Lord Vishnu hold? In 4 arms, Lord Vishnu holds
Shankha, Chakra, Gadha, Kamal. Shankha, Chakra, Gadha, and
Padma.
Padma.
Isn't it? And what does it symbolize? The Padma symbolizes the seat of wisdom, the ultimate purpose. And there is the purpose of every human is to get to that Padma, which is that seat of wisdom, the knowledge. And then there is the conch, Shankha. You find that in certain temples, they blow the conch. And it has a very beautiful effect. It has a certain resonance. It has a certain association. So the conch is compared to the conscience. So it has a very divinely association. The conch is the conscience, which is pointing to the Padma. When we do not follow the conch, which is leading us to Padma, then you get the Gada. The Gada is the knocks and shocks you go through when you are experiencing the trials and tribulations of life. The ups and downs, you get the Gada, which is the maze, symbolized by the maze. If you still don't wake up with the knocks and shocks, still don't realize where am I going wrong? Why am I being subjected to these extreme mental toll? I'm going through this mental hell. Why am I going through? If you don't realize it and you continue to be unmindful, then you get the chakra, the disc. Now the chakra, what is the chakra? Sai? What is this chakra, Sai? I don't want any description of the chakra. Philosophically, I'm asking.
Chakra is like it is cut.
That I know. Chakra is to be cut. But what is that chakra?
Case of Shishupala, for example, after he did 100 wrong
Sai,
things to
Sai,
destroy.
that is why I qualify. That is why I qualified. It is not. I don't want to know the context of what it means. You know, it's all the story part I want. When you say chakra, what are we talking about? Philosophically, what is this chakra? It's only symbolic, isn't it?
Destruction.
Correct. No. What is that which causes destruction?
This context, our own ignorance leads to
Our own actions are self-destructive in nature. So it is symbolized though as an external disc coming and annihilating or chopping you off, but philosophically it is you continue to act unmindful of the consequences. You are causing your own destruction, self-destructive actions. And what are the self-destructive actions?
which we take out of the emotional when we are under the control of, let's say, anger. When we are too much angry and we take an action out of it without rationalizing or analyzing the source of the anger.
Operating on emotions, example, anger, selfish actions. What are the actions which are not any action which is not supported by your own conscience are self-destructive in nature? And you very well know what is it that your conscience does not support. Don't tell me you do not know. In most cases, the most guilty person out there feels that sense of guilt deep within. There's a percentage that you don't even feel the guilt, then you're not wrong. But if the guilt is when your conscience pricks, isn't it? So everyone who's committing a sin very well knows he's committing a sin. So you're actually going against your own, against the grain, as they say, isn't it? You're going against your own wholesome personality, and that causes knocks and shocks. That creates severe consequences, self-destructive. And this is the sad reality I was talking, Venkatramanji. where everybody is going about doing things, atmahana, self-destructive actions. But the moment your actions resonate with the conscience, there is no knocks and shocks. All right, so you got to ensure that, go back to that cause and effect cycle we have said, ensure, inject wisdom wherever there's agitation to restore peace. And the moment peace is restored, it helps you to activate or makes your intellect erect. Your intellect becomes optimum so that it continues to produce peace. So intellect produces peace, peace produces intellect. So you will be able to perform actions which continue to produce constant peace. And the peaceful environment you have created within only sprouts thoughts of clarity, thereby creating a further resonance within and without. So it is in this virtuous cycle. I'm borrowing the term, sir. Now I've made it my own, so you can't claim it. Ramji, okay, isn't it? Now there's no more question of patenting there. It is owned by Dash. The virtuous, Hariji, we should bring out this term somewhere. The virtuous cause and effect cycle. It's a beautiful thing. It brings about so much good within and without, isn't it? Intellect producing peace and peace produce intellect. And many out there, RPG, are not aware. So therefore, in fact, in the Eternal Wisdom workshop, we spoke about this, about breaking the unending vicious cycle. Venkatramanji, you may be aware, we spoke about that vicious cycle there. Can you recall what was the vicious cycle we all are trapped in?
No, sir, I cannot recall. I can't recall at this moment.
No issues. Hariji, what is that vicious cycle we all caught up in?
It's the Rajas Tamas cycle. So
The cycle of Rajas and Tamas, yes. And what is that?
So to get away from tamas, which is lack of productivity, you get into frenzied action. So you move into rajas, but then you lose peace. And therefore you search for peace and you do it by abandoning action again. And you go back to
Tamas.
And that cycle keeps repeating because we don't achieve sattva anywhere. And you gave this big example of, thank God it's Friday. So you work very hard throughout the week, and then you move into total tamas.
So from frenzied action to inaction, from inaction to frenzied action, hardly anybody realizes the grandeur of performing sattva, which is transcending action, isn't it? The trans-sattva or sattva is where you transcend action itself. All right, so it all fits in. So one is the vicious cycle, other is the virtuous cycle. Wonderful.